Let's make some trades. Buy low, sell high. The most traded list. Is this the time to go get a tight end? We got some, what we thought were going to be very good tight ends that are off to some pretty slow starts. Maybe this is the time to pounce. And we'll preview Thursday Night Football, Detroit and Green Bay. Looks like those two teams are getting healthy ahead of Thursday Night Football, which is great. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy Hump Day. I'm Adam Azer with Heath Cummings and Jamie Asberg. You guys see any crazy Josh Palmer or Quentin Johnston fab bids?
I saw a $51 bid for Josh Palmer. I think all the leagues that I ran waivers in last night, Devon Achane was already rostered.
He went in one of mine for 80.
Yeah. That was our
Was
10
that the for the what was that in?
Yeah, that was our 10 team for the People League.
Okay. But like I didn't see any necessarily crazy, but everybody continues to bid more than me. I'm got all this fab in my pocket. I'm gonna just make a terrible decision next week.
Heath has decided to leave me with all the fab decisions in our league. So I did put a $62.
Well, you've got a pretty strong history of ad drops in that league. And I don't
Thank you for trusting me.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think Palmer went for he went for $34 in my FFT Open division, which is only 1 and 2. I got to get better there. I'm only 1 and 2. I did not get him there.
What's your record, Heath?
31.
2-1.
Nice.
You, Jamie?
3-0.
3-0. All right. I got a 3-0 team in my FFT Open division. That would be Elijah and Glenn Lipkin. Congratulations, but I'm coming for you. All right, let's get to the show. Our favorite buy low, our favorite sell high. How about the stat of the week? One of my favorite weeks is Mike Evans versus the Saints. It's so difficult, right? He's got the worst history against the Saints, but right now he's the number 5 wide receiver in fantasy. In 10 games against New Orleans with Marshawn Lattimore playing, Mike Evans has scored more than 13 fantasy points once. He has single-digit PPR fantasy points in 5 of those 10 games. He has more than 64 yards only once. So that's Mike Evans with, I think, the worst history versus a team that I can think of, right? I mean, for a guy that's been in the league that long and this big of a sample size. Are you guys running away from Mike Williams this week?
Mike Williams, yes. He has
100%.
no need.
Mike Evans? Mike Evans too?
Although I don't know if you have to run away from Mike Williams. I think with Mike Evans, he's one of those, like, there's 2 guys for me when I was doing my rankings. I don't know how you felt about this, Heath, but Joe Mixon against the Titans and Mike Evans against the Saints. Those are 2 guys, like, I'm still ranking as starters. You can't sit them, but the history / matchup is not pleasant for both.
Yeah, I'm still mostly at the point where the rankings are the projections. And so I haven't adjusted for stuff like this quite as much, but Evans will be a number 2 wide receiver for me, somewhere probably between 16 and 20, if I was guessing.
Like, you got to be, and it's easier with Evans to find a replacement, but like, how are you getting away from what he's done so far? Like,
because I went back and I looked.
No, I know it's ugly, but it's like you have to really be in a great situation to bench him.
Well, no, it's not just that I looked at. I mean, obviously we know the history. It's also, was he red hot going into the Saints game? And there have certainly been times where, yeah, he's coming off a huge performance.
But he's never had Baker Mayfield.
That's never had Baker Mayfield. That is true. I didn't do my Mixon research yet, but trying to look at him in super tough matchups last year. Ravens, he had 14 carries for 78 yards and 3 for 10. That was a solid game. Did not face Tennessee. He missed the Tennessee game last year. Ravens again in week 18, 11 carries for 27 yards, but he scored a touchdown and he had 5 catches in that game. So the catches saved him and that touchdown, I guess. All right, let's get our favorite buy low and our favorite sell high. Who wants to go first? Who's your favorite buy low? Anyone feeling it?
I'll say Josh Jacobs. Partially because he plays the Chargers this week, and that might just be the get-right matchup for struggling running backs. We saw it last week with Alexander Madison. Also because, Adam, I was thinking about this last night. You and I think it was on the Draftathon, talked to Robert Turbin, and we were asking about these running backs holding out and how it might impact them. And he actually predicted this. He said it might take until the first month of the season before Josh Jacobs is himself again, but he'll be fine. And he's not quite been himself. I thought we saw a couple of flashes in week 3 where things started to look a little bit better. I still expect Josh Jacobs to be a top 12 running back for the rest of the season. So if you can get him for anything less than that, go buy.
Okay. So I know I've asked you, but we'll do it again. You give up the Dolphins running backs for Jacobs?
Yes.
All right. Jamie, who's your favorite buy low?
I'll go to Calvin Ridley. 2 miserable games, and I'm sure some fantasy managers with Ridley are struggling. But if you've watched the games, you see that he's dropped several touchdowns and had opportunities in the end zone to do so. And I think Trevor Lawrence is playing better than his stats have shown. Plus, the schedule I think will be favorable for them moving forward. So I would try and get Calvin Ridley if you can get him cheap. Like if you turn Mike Evans and Calvin Ridley, I would do that.
All right. I mean, doesn't Evans look amazing though? I don't even know what to make of it. I mean, he's having such a good year. Like I said, number 5, pardon me, number 5 wide receiver. Where are you on Evans in general?
I think he's been awesome, but you're still talking about a 31-year-old receiver that I think Baker's playing over his head a little bit in terms of lack of turnovers. Chris Godwin at some point is going to have some productive games. They might have a productive stretch where Baker's only touchdown of the game goes to Godwin. So I'd be looking to sell Evans if you can, just because he's, I think at some point due to have a little bit of letdown. Might happen starting this week.
So 3 of the top 5, 4 of the top 7, and 5 of the top 11 wide receivers in fantasy right now are 30 or older. It's Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, Adam Thielen. He'll probably stay there after this week. It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, well, you just watch Devontae Adams. I don't think anyone's got any age concerns about him, right? I mean,
or Keenan Allen.
Amazing. Yeah, Keenan Allen. I don't know how you feel about Allen and Herbert. Let's go on to our sell highs here, right? This is kind of a good transition here. We got these older wide receivers. I don't know how you feel about Allen and Herbert now. I was going to bring him up later, but they have faced Minnesota and Tennessee in their last 2 games. That's really favorable. Maybe the Williams injury helps Keenan Allen, but I don't think it helps Justin Herbert. Is anybody thinking this is the time to sell Herbert?
I mean, you're selling him for who? We had this conversation. I had this conversation with Dave on HQ yesterday. That he was saying that I think he said Trevor Lawrence was a buy low. He might have said a quarterback was a sell high. I don't remember. But when you trade quarterbacks, you have to get some sort of quarterback in return, right? Unless you have somebody on your bench.
Yeah.
So if you're selling him, it's got to be part of a package. Or buying him, it's got to be part of a package. So I think for Herbert, like if you're selling Herbert to the Fields manager, I get it. If you have Kirk Cousins on your bench, or if you have a Geno Smith or a Jared Goff, if you trust those guys long term, then that's fine. But it's most likely part of some package because you need some quarterback in return, most likely. So just, I don't know. I would be probably keeping Justin Herbert at this point.
Okay.
I do think that example of having Herbert and Cousins is the one where I think the perceived value of Herbert versus his actual value is higher than the same thing with Cousins. So if I had those 2 guys, I'd be selling Herbert.
Okay. I think that's more of a general question. Is this the peak of Justin Herbert? He's QB3 right now, coming off these 2 good matchups, just lost a starting wide receiver. And he gets Eckler back. And I remember, Heath, a couple weeks ago, you said you actually boosted Herbert's projections without Eckler.
Yeah.
So maybe that's actually a bad thing, slightly bad. I don't know. Is this the peak of Justin Herbert's value, I guess, is really what the question was.
Yeah, I think, and listen, I don't want to say that and mean that he's definitely going to be worse than QB3 the rest of the season. I don't think he's going to probably be better. So I think this is the peak, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I don't believe he can maintain that peak through the end of the year.
It's also a guy that was the first 2 years of his career an unbelievable fantasy quarterback, and now has his best play caller as an offensive coordinator. And last year, when he lost his receivers, he didn't have what's behind Mike Williams, excuse me. It's an unknown because we don't know what Quentin Johnson can become. But if he becomes a first-round talent, then that's going to still keep Justin Herbert at this level from a receiving core standpoint.
Yeah. Listen, you don't have to sell Justin Herbert. He's been great, but I just wanted to bring it up with the schedule. So then with that said, who's got a favorite sell high?
I mean, for me, I'd be selling Jerome Ford if you can, just because there's clearly a potential for drop off for a guy that, has shown some spikes from a fantasy production, but also some potential flaws if they're going to use Kareem Hunt and maybe Pierre Strong like we saw last week, and some of the schedule concerns that we have. But I think if you're selling him, you got to be getting something good in return, because you're trying to sell him as this is Nick Chubb's replacement. This is the guy who's going to produce at that level. And I don't know if he's capable of that. So people need running backs. You picked him up for a lot. You might have picked him up as just a bench ad, not necessarily a guy you have to start. So if you could flip him for something, I'd be trying to trade him.
Yeah, I think Ford is a great one. His production, almost all touchdowns and one long run. Assuming that Mostert is the obvious, everyone's saying that. I'd sell Kyren Williams, another guy whose production has a lot to do with the touchdowns. I'm still not totally sure that the Rams are going to be anything other than bad. And so if I could get anything close to an RB1 for him, I'd be pretty happy to sell him.
I think I want to sell Jerome Ford straight up for Mark Andrews. I don't know if I can do it.
Sure.
I would like to do that as well.
Why not just aim for, Travis Kelce? And you know what? Travis Kelce and throw in Taylor Swift.
No, you got a starting running back here. And, people might be a little split on Mark Andrews. That one good game, he's got one bad game. This is a topic I do want to talk about, the tight ends. The Ravens have the lowest pass rate in the NFL. All this talk about they're going to throw the ball more. They have the lowest pass rate, which that's
interesting, because I think Lamar has the second highest pass attempts per game in his career.
It's not that high. And you know what? 4 of his attempts last week came in overtime. He only threw 27 passes in regulation. He had 22 pass attempts in one. I guess they're running a lot of plays in week 1. So maybe you can overcome that if you run a lot of plays. But a starting running back for us, if people view him as a slumping tight end, you think that's ridiculous? I'm gonna offer it right now.
I don't think the Mark Andrews manager is doing that. And again, it's like trading quarterbacks. Like, what does the Mark Andrews manager have a tight end that's willing to give up to get Jerome Ford? Like, you got to be really, really desperate at running back to be moving on from what Mark Andrews has been and still has the potential to be. So I think, like, if you want to trade Jerome Ford and Hunter Henry for Mark Andrews, like, that might happen. Obviously, you could do Jerome Ford and Sam Laporta for Mark Andrews. I think the Andrews manager would probably consider that. But you have to make sure that person has a tight end. Like, if I'm Mark Andrews' manager and, okay, my running backs have just been decimated and I need running back help, sure, I would love to have what kind of running back maybe Jerome Ford might be. But what am I replacing Mark Andrews with?
Well, the Darst is the Mark Andrews manager, and he's starting Jalen Warren, although he does have David Montgomery. But all right,
what's the tight end situation?
He's got Mark Andrews, and he has Luke Musgrave. He's fine. Okay.
I think if you want to try to get a top tier tight end, like trading Jerome Ford for Darren Waller makes a ton of sense to me.
All right, I'll try that one after this gets rejected. Okay. I could also go Raheem Mostert for Mark Andrews, but we should get to the tight ends. Did we Jerome Ford and Kyren Williams? Okay. Tight ends coming up in a little bit. Let me just tell you about our live streams. Thursday night, we are on the air at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Check us out. We will be exclusively on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday, where also you can see all of our podcasts. So if you want to see what we look like. See, we got Jamie's got a hat on. That's pretty typical. Heath doesn't have a hat on today. I've got a long sleeve t-shirt on. That's pretty typical.
I wear a hat once a week. That's typical.
Really? I feel like you wear a hat a lot.
Just Wednesdays.
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it was a Wednesday tradition. All right. Good to know. Anyway, youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday. We'll see you at 7:30 p.m. Eastern to answer your questions before Thursday Night Football. That will be tomorrow. And we got more planned here. Got to get my mixer queued up. Sorry. Time for the Fantasy Cops. Working on a Wednesday. Working the beat. All right. This comes from A-Rod. I got the player I was wanting, but not for the amount of fab that I was wanting to spend. I had $97 worth of fab left. I originally put a bid in for $7. Later in the day, I went in and I changed it for $9. Well, when I woke up this morning to see if I got Josh Palmer, it showed that I spent $97 worth of fab on Josh Palmer. Oh. So he tried for $7, tried to change it to $9, and he accidentally put 97. Only thing I can see is that I didn't erase getting my fab back, I didn't erase the $7 bid and just added the $9 bid. Do I have a fighting chance at making a case for getting my fab back? Or do I take my L like a man and move on? By the way, this is a first-year dynasty league and all of our first years with fab. And I am the commissioner Oh, that makes it more challenging here. What would you all do?
It's $100?
Yeah, I think so.
I think if it's $100, you explain your situation to the league and say, here's what happened, especially if it's a group of friends that trust each other. And if it's on Yahoo, you can see. I don't think we have the ability on CBS to see what the bid history was, or at least publicly. But if somebody was bidding more than 9, then you just give them Josh Palmer, or whoever was the highest bid. And
What if nobody was bidding more than 9? You can't just give them to yourself for 9.
Yeah.
I guess maybe the fair thing would be is put him back on waivers and let somebody put bids in on Wednesday.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think so.
I think that's the fair thing to do. I think because you're commissioner, if there is a big stink about that, you might have to wear it.
Yeah.
Oh man, your whole in a dynasty league, he should go for a lot of money. I mean, I don't think is he available? I know he's not available in the Big Burger Dynasty League.
I don't know if he'll go for a lot of money. I mean, I think if you're basing on the standpoint that there's not a lot of players available,
yeah,
then yes. But his long-term appeal is not as appealing because he might be looking for a new team next year.
Right, right.
I'm not sure he's more valuable in Dynasty than he is in redraft.
Well, no, okay. He's not more valuable in Dynasty, but most Dynasty leagues have really big rosters and really bad waiver wires. So I'm looking at our Dynasty league.
Okay.
Allen Robinson is the highest projected wide receiver available. So in that case, if Josh Palmer had been available, I probably would have bid $70 or more. I mean, I'm not bidding really on anyone in this league. I don't know if your other Dynasty leagues are like that, but I feel like Dynasty leagues waiver wire is kind of.
Yeah, no, I just because I had a roster spot to burn, I picked up Latavius Murray in Heath's Dynasty League last night for 21 out of 1,000. So
right. Okay. All right. Thank you for your Fantasy Cops entry. We're gonna take a break. When we come back, we're gonna talk about all those tight ends. Do we buy low on Kyle Pitts? Do we buy low on Darren Waller? We'll talk about that right after this.
Electrifying action is back to back on CBS Sports Network.
All right, so the tight ends have gotten off to a bit of a slow start, okay? But do we still have faith in them? So the 4 that I wanted to focus on, feel free to bring others into this discussion, were Mark Andrews, who was really good in week 1, but 4 catches for 35 yards on 5 targets. Yeah, that's right. He didn't play in week 1. Really good in week 2, but struggled in week 3. Darren Waller's had 1 good game out of 3. He has struggled against the Cowboys and the 49ers, gets the Seahawks this week. Kyle Pitts, I think going back to last year, he has played 14 games and has more than 50 yards in 2 of them. So that's Kyle Pitts. And then there's Dallas Goedert, who is averaging 4.2 yards per target, which is atrocious. And he's usually, the last 2 years, he was over 10 yards per target. But Goddard's off to a very slow start. With another concerning sign for Goedert that has continued in the Jalen Hurts era, never gets targeted near the end zone. He has 1 red zone, 0 green zone, and 0 end zone targets. And every time they're near the end zone, they just push Jalen Hurts in anyway. But so Jamie, as you look at those 4 tight ends, I don't know if you want to throw Kittle in there. Kittle's only had 1 good game and it was without Ayuk. But is this the time to go get one of the tight ends, or should we just leave them alone?
Well, I think, again, it's relative to what the manager with those tight ends is giving up or has on their team to give up one of those tight ends. Because I know I have, Waller in a couple of leagues. I have Pitts in a couple of leagues. And if I had somebody else, then I'd be willing to part with them. But for the most part, I haven't at least yet with the Waller teams. For the Pitts teams, I know one of them in particular, I picked up Hunter Henry. I'm not necessarily willing to part with them without having a backup plan in place. So if, as a Waller manager, if someone were to come to me and say, here's Hunter Henry and something, certainly Laporta would get it done. But I don't know the Laporta manager is doing that. But if you're looking to acquire, or so you're looking to part with one of those guys, you have to have something in return. So that's what makes it more challenging.
Yeah, I think it's a sliding scale. Like, I'd give a number 2 running back or wide receiver for Mark Andrews, and I'd give a low-end starter for Waller. I'd give a bench player for Goddard. I'm probably not trading for Kyle Pitts. I'd pick him up if somebody dropped him, but I don't think I'm giving up somebody for Pitts.
Right, like if the Pitts manager is in a situation like I'm in, where picked up Hunter Henry and let's say just lost a Mike Williams or lost one of these running backs, Nick Chubb or something along the way, and you want to say here's running back X or wide receiver X for Pitts and maybe something else, it's a move that's in your benefit, but I wouldn't be giving up, as Heath alluded to, something significant.
Well, we've got these running backs that have been picked up off the waiver wire who have emerged. Like, okay, I mean, I hate to make this about me, but on one team, I have Raheem Mostert, Jerome Ford, and DeAndre Swift, right? And these are all guys that, and then throw Kyren Williams in the mix. I don't have him, but guys that maybe you have some running back depth. And how many of those guys would you trade DeAndre Swift straight up for Mark Andrews? Would you trade him for Darren Waller or Dallas Goedert?
DeAndre Swift is a perfect one because I think he's a sell high candidate, just knowing his injury history, his lack of work in the passing game. He's in on goal line chances, but he's pushing, he's not running, so yeah. It's one of those situations where, he falls into the sell high category. So if you can turn DeAndre Swift, especially if he was, a third or fourth running back that you drafted, depending on how early you did your draft, then sure, that's the smart move to make.
And you said you'd only trade Swift for Andrews, Heath. You wouldn't trade him for Waller.
Correct.
And you like Waller better than Goddard?
I guess so. I'm a little bit nervous about Goddard. Like, it's hard. I was pretty low on Waller coming into the year, and I hasn't been much reason to move him up other than the fact that a ton of guys have fallen behind him.
I think the thing with Pitts, just while we're talking about it, is you're hearing Arthur Smith talk about we have to get, the phrasing used, more explosives in the passing game. That if Ritter continues to struggle, do we get a quarterback change?
Oh, yeah. Well, here's the thing. I mean, Dan and I both watched Kyle Pitts from week 3, and we both felt the same way. He does not look healthy.
No, he's not healthy.
He is laboring and it's like almost limping around out there. It's crazy. And maybe it's a bit of an exaggeration, but lumbering, I think, is the word we used. He just does not look like what we expected. And I am not buying low on Kyle Pitts.
But I also said, I said that to Chris on FFTN 5 yesterday, and it is true that he's lumbering and still running past DBs.
I did say that as well. You're right. I just don't trust like early in the game in week 3, he ran right by a couple of Lions defenders and he was open for a deep shot and Ritter missed him. So I don't know if it's going to happen enough where Ritter's going to be able to connect on a high enough percentage. But I mean, Waller, if you want a reason to be optimistic about Waller, he didn't play in the second half of week 1. In the first half, his target share was 42%. Okay, it's not going to be that high. In the second game, his target share was 23%. In the third game, his target share was 22%. Daniel Jones is off to an awful start, but the one game that Daniel Jones was good, Darren Waller had about 80 yards. So it's kind of a bet. If you're going to bet that Jones is going to bounce back, then I think Waller will bounce back with him because I'm very confident he's going to lead the team in targets. So, what is it? What are those? How many yards is Jones going to throw for? Is it going to give us like 220 a game? I hope so. All right. And then any thoughts on Goddard? I mean, he's still like 7 targets in 2 straight games. He should be doing really well with 7 targets, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's not been as many passes down the field for him, but his ADOT's not that much different than it was last year. It's just not a whole lot after the catch. He's catching a lot of passes 2 yards from the line of scrimmage and getting chopped down almost immediately. And there's been a lot more running than I was hoping for out of this Eagles offense.
Yeah. Jalen Hurts is currently on pace for 3,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. Last year, before his injury, he was on pace for 4,200 yards and 27 touchdowns. Apparently, they had the flu or something like that in week 3. He and Kelsey and some others were dealing with an illness. But again, right? I mean, if you think the Eagles are going to come around, Goddard should be better than this. And there's appeal to having a tight end at this point where you just don't even have to look at the waiver wire and have to worry about this streaming game. Just like the one league I have Goddard in, I know he's been disappointing, but I'm not even considering benching him or looking for another guy, right?
Right.
Yeah, agreed. And clearly he's better in full PPR than he is the other formats because he's not scoring touchdowns and he's not getting a lot of yards. But we're dealing with this with really the entire Eagles offense. Like we've had 2 good games of Devontae Smith, 1 miserable game, 2 miserable games of AJ Brown, 1 good game, and 2 okay, I guess, games for Dallas Goedert. But really, the question is, like, how many tight ends do you really trust right now?
Yeah. How many
3,
tight
4?
ends are on your team and you're not even thinking about the waiver wire?
It's Kelsey, it's Andrews, it's Hawkinson for sure. That's no brainers. I still put Waller in that category just because I think some of it has been just how the team has played. Like, then Laporta, maybe, I guess.
I'm not really thinking about the waiver wire if I have Kittle or Goddard though either.
Well,
I'm just
would you feel that
starting.
way if Ayuk had played Thursday night and he had another stinker? Like, it's
Right.
I'm with you probably for the most part on Kittle, but it's I guess you could put Ingram in the same category too. Like,
Oh,
I'm not,
Ingram's a good call. Yeah. Would you
but
turn Ingram into into these guys?
would you turn Ingram into?
These buy low tight ends? I know you turn him into Andrews for sure. Would you turn him into Waller or Goddard? Would you trade
Yeah,
Ingram?
I would.
I think Andrews is the only one that I'd make that move. It's not that I definitely think he's going to be better than Waller. I just probably wouldn't go to the trouble. I think they're close enough.
All right, then the last question: Raheem Mostert or Devon Achane? If you were going to trade one of them for one of these tight ends, would you do that for any of them?
I think for Andrews, it makes sense.
Yep.
And then again, the nice thing about when you get players like this is they were not drafted to be starters on your team. So if the starter on your team or the starters on your team are performing well, and you're having this lineup crunch, do I have to play most over these guys? At this point, you probably should be, but you're alleviating some level of headache while benefiting some other part of your roster. So yes, I would try to turn Raheem Mostert into a Mark Andrews for sure.
I've got an update for you. Just got a text from Darst. You know what's funny? I said, man, I need a running back. Maybe Azer would trade Ford to me, but I got to see what to offer. And I said, maybe Andrews. So I said, let's do it. I'll let you know. I will let you know. All right, what's next? Your news and notes are next. All right, the Jets signed Trevor Siemian. Does this matter? Is this the next quarterback for the Jets, guys?
Maybe. It's if this is their attempt to put a Band-Aid on it, it's probably not going to work. I don't think Trevor Siemian is that much of an upgrade over Zach Wilson, although we said the same thing about Mike White and Joe Flacco last year, and those guys were definitely better for Garrett Wilson. So really, that's all that matters to me is, can somebody get Garrett Wilson the ball consistently and allow him to be a playmaker? So you'll take anything at this point. But man, it's like, what are they doing?
Yeah, right. I'm not particularly excited about Trevor Siemian, although a revenge game against the Broncos would be fun next week. I also think I'm not ready to say that I know for sure Zach Wilson hasn't improved at all. He's played the Bills, the Cowboys, and Bill Belichick. Like, let's see a little bit more.
Yeah. All right.
They got to give him the chance to start against the Broncos, right? And then maybe everything's just fine if you play the Broncos.
What a lot of intrigue in that. Remember, obviously, with Sean Payton just trashing Nathaniel Hackett. So good news for the Thursday night game. Christian Watson and Aaron Jones are trending in the right direction, and David Montgomery appears likely to play. The Monday night game, the Giants are getting healthier. The left side of their offensive line looks like it's back. Andrew Thomas and Ben Bredesen. But Saquon Barkley still day-to-day. That one we just don't know about yet, but they will practice.
Take one more week off. Take one more week off. Don't come back early and limp through a month of the season.
Yeah, I know. I feel.
Then it's a short week after that too.
Xavier Woods, Carolina safety. He could be out 4 to 6 weeks with a hamstring injury. And also cornerback CJ Henderson is hurt, and linebacker Frankie Louvu is hurt. So these are, I talked about this yesterday, but the Panthers, with already Shaq Thompson out for the year, with JC Horn on IR, one of the most injured teams defensively in football, and here come the Vikings. And Doug Peterson, Jacksonville's head coach, said he did not take over play calling duties in the second half of week 3. Why don't we preview Thursday Night Football? And then, another storyline is the return of Alvin Kamara. Cooper Kupp and Jonathan Taylor might be one more week away. So I think it's important that we assign values to those guys at some point in this show and see if we how much we like them. Kamara, Kupp, and Jonathan Taylor rest of season. But in the meantime, it's Detroit at Green Bay. Take it away, Dave. Nah. Thank you, Dave. Detroit at Green Bay. I was gonna have a Luke Musgrave's ranking dispute, but I don't remember if it was Dave who was the high guy or low guy on him. Where are you guys on Luke Musgrave?
Top 12.
Just outside for me.
Okay, then we're not going to have a rankings dispute on Luke Musgrave. But the injuries, obviously, Heath, play a big role here. So let's talk about the return. It looks like they're going to be returning players and the impacts of Watson and Jones and David Montgomery.
Yeah, I mean, if Jones returns, I'm starting him as a number 2 running back, maybe even maybe a low end number 1. It'd be somewhere in that 10 to 15 range. I'm probably going to be a little bit more cautious with Christian Watson coming off a long absence with a hamstring, with all the way they've spread the ball around a little bit, but he would ding Dobbs and Reed and Musgrave, or will ding those guys just enough. I'll probably have Watson ranked the highest of the wide receivers, but none of them will be in my top 40 wide receivers.
Does that ding like ring a bell, or like ding like just hurt them?
Hurt them. Like a hail dent in a car.
Okay, so which quarterback do you like better in this game? Jared Goff on the road is not exactly Jared Goff at home. He scored more than 20 fantasy points once in 8 road games last year.
Oh,
So
it's worse than that. It's once in his last 13 games going back to 2021.
Yikes.
And he's been no, I'm sorry. You said once he was 20 points once last year?
More than 20 points once in 8 road games.
No, he was under 20 every game since 2021. 13 straight games.
Okay.
Unless
Sure.
I read it differently.
All right, I'm gonna do
this?
the Dave research thing.
Okay, go ahead. You want me to look it up? All right.
I got
Yeah, I'm going with Jordan Love. Getting Christian Watson back, as Heath alluded to, I think that will not ding him. That will help him. Especially Aaron Jones back as well, and then we'll find out if Bakhtiari plays. So this Lions team, the last 2 games, has been good for opposing quarterbacks. So, or 2 of 3 games, excuse me, has been good for opposing quarterbacks. So I think Jordan Love's in a good spot.
Okay. So who are you starting Love over? How about Deshaun Watson?
Yep.
How about Daniel Jones?
Yep.
Yep.
Over Burrow, over Fields, over
Burrow. You know how I am struggling with Burrow
100%
so much.
over Burrow.
Titans, but it's the Titans.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't necessarily fear Burrow this week to the level of he's going to stink. But Jordan Love is just playing at a different level right now.
Okay,
I found
so it looks like Jared Goff did throw for 355 yards and 3 touchdowns at Carolina in week 16 last year.
When did I miss it?
Oh man, you hate to go up head to head in a stat off with Jamie or Dave or Heath, but I'm glad I came away on top this time. Yeah.
I'm glad you caught it before I sent it in.
Yeah, all right. There we go. I'm your editor. No problem here. All right, so you're starting over Burrow. How about Geno Smith against the Giants or Jordan Love?
Love.
And Heath, you like Goff? Do you have him 10th?
I think, yeah, they're both top 12. And again, it's still the projections. I don't have a big change for Goff in road games. Quarterback's really tough once you get past the top 8 this week, because I don't want to trust Joe Burrow at all. It's really hard to rank Justin. Like, I've got him 12th, and to rank him much higher than that. I'm not super excited about Trevor Lawrence. I definitely don't want to start Dak Prescott. Like that, it's just there are not 12 quarterbacks that I like this week.
Yeah, but it is fun though, because Fields, Jones, and Geno in particular, and Burrow have what look like really good matchups. This will be a fun week of quarterback debates. All right, so Jamie says sit Goff and start Love. Heath says start both of them, but Love ahead of Goff by 1 spot as of right now. We look at the running backs, and just to knock the Packers out of the way, if Aaron Jones doesn't play, don't even think about A.J. Dillon. But Aaron Jones actually did struggle, I think, in 2 games. I think he left one early, though, last year. He did, in fact, leave one early against the Lions. But, man, this run defense is so good. So just to throw it out there, is there any hesitation? I mean, look what they just did to Bijan Robinson. I don't think there's been a 40-yard – no running back has more than 43 rushing yards against the Lions this year. And that includes Ken Walker and Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, I think you're starting Jones. You're counting on him as a pass catcher as well. And look at the state of the running back position. Like, it's just, we're talking about, we're going to start Joe Mixon against the Titans. I'm not going to sit Aaron Jones against the Lions.
All right, then how do you feel about the Lions running backs if David Montgomery plays, and rank the 3 running backs in this game if Montgomery and Jones are both in?
Jones in PPR, Jones, Gibbs, Montgomery.
Yeah.
I
All
think
right,
David Montgomery's stock improved with the absence.
right. That's what I'm saying here. Is like, you know me, I'm not the David Montgomery guy,
Really?
but I think I liked him at his ADP. We all did. We thought he was a great value. I don't know why I should start Jahmyr Gibbs over him. Is it just waiting to see what happens off the injury? Is that the thing? Because
If he doesn't score, you're going to be in a tough spot because he's not going to catch passes, at least based on what we saw.
But that's the thing. He actually ran a lot more routes. I don't know why they were throwing to him, but he ran a lot more routes than Gibbs in week 1. And then it was basically
Throw out week 1 from a route standpoint. They weren't playing Jahmyr Gibbs.
That's fair. Okay. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I think he's the lead running back here until
By
further.
definition of what you're saying, yes, he is the lead running back.
I think all 3, and I'm going to make that update this afternoon, but I think all 3 will probably be in my top 25 running backs.
Yes.
How about Dolphins running back or a running back in this game?
Mostert
over all of them, and probably Achane behind all but Dylan. He's already in front of Dylan to begin with.
How about the Kyren Williams versus Zach Moss Bowl, Rams at Colts? You like any of them ahead of the running backs in this Lions game? Lions Packers?
I would play Moss over all of them.
Yep.
And I would probably go Williams over both Lions guys, just because, again, they may cannibalize each other a little bit. Like, the thing about Williams, like, I don't think Heath's wrong what he said, but like, it's hard to get away from someone who's playing 100% of the snaps.
Yeah.
Man, I think people have the right to be frustrated with Jahmyr Gibbs' production so far. Would you start Josh Palmer over Jahmyr Gibbs?
No.
Would you start T. Higgins or Jahmyr Gibbs?
Higgins.
Yep.
Okay. All right, wide receivers in this game, anyone other than Amon-Ra St. Brown. And by the way, I did my best to figure out what the heck happened to Josh Reynolds last week. And I don't remember who said the A.J. Terrell thing, but he did see a lot of A.J. Terrell. It wasn't shadowed by him, but he saw a lot of A.J. Terrell last week, and he ran very deep routes and just was not open. I watched more than half his routes, but I think he had his highest route depth of the season. So he just wasn't open from what I saw. But anyone other than St. Brown? Heath already talked a little bit about the Packers wide receivers, but Jamie, how about you? Anyone other than St. Brown in this game?
Just Laporta. But in terms of the receivers, I think the thing about Josh Reynolds is if you picked him up and you've been starting him, I wouldn't necessarily look at last week and say, okay, he's done. So, if you need to go back to him, go back to him. Do we know the status of Jair Alexander?
I do not.
Right. So that kind of changes things too, in terms of what the secondary looks like for Green Bay also. But I don't think Josh Reynolds is on a lot of people's rosters with must start responsibility. So as long as that's the case, then you bench him and just see what this week shows you for him.
Jair Alexander was limited in practice. A good sign for him. Laporta, easy start, and Musgrave, low-end starter. You said so. It's the thing about Musgrave is now Christian Watson and Jones back. How does that impact him?
It could cut into his target share for sure. I think you're just counting on the good matchup and hoping with Jordan Love's touchdown rate that keeps up and Musgrave gets one of them.
Okay. And you have Musgrave, Heath, you have him ahead of Pitts and Freiermuth and Goddard. You going to keep it that way?
Pitts and Freiermuth, yes. Goddard, no.
Okay. Jamie, yeah, you are. Okay. Jamie, you are lower on him. It's 6 spots in the rankings, but it looks like Musgrave's going to move down a little bit. Jamie, you have Gerald Everett and Jake Ferguson ahead of Musgrave. Is that going to change?
No, it's not. I have it. We ranked Christian Watson, so that's where I have Musgrave with Watson playing. Okay. So you factor in Aaron Jones playing also, and that's just more targets, I think, going in a different direction. So he had a spike in targets last week. I think what he was in week 1 and week 2 is more probably what we should expect. And while the Lions have given up, yardage to tight ends, it's not like they're giving up a ton of fantasy points to tight ends. So I'm not necessarily looking at this as a slam dunk matchup for a rookie tight end that is yet to really have an overwhelming performance.
All right.
Everett, to me, we had this conversation on, I think yesterday, just in terms of like the 1 week streaming option. Everett saw a 6-catch. He's coming off a 6-catch game where they just lost Mike Williams.
Yeah. All right. So I think I would be remiss to not ask some Christian Watson questions. Would you rather start Christian Watson or DJ Moore or Jerry Jeudy in that game?
Moore and Judy.
Moore and Judy.
Christian Watson or Michael Thomas?
It's closer in PPR, but I would probably lean toward Watson.
Thomas for me.
Christian Watson or David Montgomery in PPR?
Montgomery.
Watson.
Christian Watson, last one, or Rashad White?
White.
Watson.
All right, Rashad White is at New Orleans. Okay, and that's it. Oh, DSTs, any interest?
Not really, no.
And that's it for Thursday Night Football. Nah. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about these guys who are returning from injury or suspension. We'll read your buy lows and sell highs. We'll read your emails at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. Stick around.
The Scudetto, where the soul of Italy meets the pinnacle of calcio. Catch Serie A on CBS Sports Network and streaming live on Paramount+.
I'm going to ask you guys to rank these players rest of season, and they involve players who are hopefully coming back. Jonathan Taylor, the last we heard, he had a chance to come back in week 5. Same with Cooper Kupp. Kamara is back this week. So let's start with this one. Rank them rest of season. Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon, Jahmyr Gibbs.
You know, it's funny because Zach Moss looked awesome in this offense, and Zach Moss is just a guy compared to Jonathan Taylor. So if Taylor is committed, and let's just say the Colts win this game and they're 3-1, like he should be committed, right?
Yeah, and they should be committed.
So I would go Taylor, Mixon, Gibbs.
Yeah, I think that commitment thing, I'd almost feel better about Taylor if he was somewhere else, because I'm concerned that it's an ankle tweak and he's not playing anymore. They didn't meet his demands or concerns. He's still on the same contract that he was with no security beyond this year. So I just don't know that I believe that he's going to risk very much for them.
Who's trading for him and paying him though? Like, do you
right?
have a
Yeah,
destination?
I'm not sure anybody is.
Yeah.
So, although maybe the Packers, as bad as AJ Dillon was, they were one of the teams that was allegedly interested in the first place. Mixon, Gibbs, Taylor.
Really? Okay. Just because there is a lot of uncertainty. I mean, it's tough to give up a lot for Jonathan Taylor right now because it could go either way. All right, so that's completely different. So Jamie went Taylor, Mixon, Gibbs, and Heath went Mixon, Gibbs, Taylor. Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, and Dameon Pierce. How would you rank Kamara, Swift, and Pierce?
In that order?
Swift, Kamara, Pierce, but definitely Pierce last.
Yeah, Kamara, kind of funny. I feel like people are forgetting the reasons why we were concerned about Kamara. He has not had
one is gone.
He has not had a 30. He has not had a run longer than 30 yards in either of the last 2 seasons. He's 28, coming off 2 years where he's averaged 3.7 and 4 yards per carry. He hasn't performed that well.
There's like a 50-50 chance he looks like Dalvin Cook.
And you say one of them is gone, Jamie, but he's not gone for the season, Jamal Williams.
No, he meant the suspension, I thought.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I meant Jamal Williams.
You meant Jamal Williams, okay.
Yeah. And then there's still that Taysom Hill guy. Oh, yeah. I don't know. What do you think? Like, if we were redrafting today, when would you take Alvin Kamara?
If we're redrafting today, like he's active, no suspension?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we're starting the season right now.
I would say the 4th round, but that's where I would probably be looking at these other guys too.
So how high has James Conner risen? Because I think Kamara and Conner are pretty much right in the, like, they're the same age. We've seen Conner look good already this year. So round 4 seems right.
I would take Conner ahead of them. Yeah.
Okay. Swift, I mean, just to talk about one of the most relevant players. You talked about him earlier, Jamie, as being a sell high. discuss. I mean, I understand why, but what are you just putting that label on Swift all about?
Well, I mean, you just said it. One of the more relevant players. He's been fantastic in 2 primetime games, and it's hard to get past what he can be if he stays healthy, which is, I think a better version of Miles Sanders last year, and Sanders was great. But he's had a hard time staying healthy. He's got a limited touchdown potential. He's got limited touchdown potential because of what they do when they get inside the 5. And he's getting zero work in the passing game at this point, minimal work in the passing game. So I don't know. I mean, I think if you can get something great in return for DeAndre Swift, I'd be doing that. I'm not giving him away.
Right. Okay.
I think Swift and Moss are two of the most like fascinating big swing types at lower levels, because Swift could be a top 5 running back the rest of the season, or we know how it can blow up with him. And if Taylor gets traded, then Moss is a top 20 running back, or he's completely worthless and probably on the waiver wire.
I don't mean to take a shot at Kenneth Gainwell, but just what a difference when DeAndre Swift is carrying the football. It is really fun to watch this guy just exploding. All right, rank them rest of season. Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans.
Allen, Kupp, Evans.
I agree with the Allen part. Allen, Kupp, Evans.
You guys feel fairly confident in Cooper Kupp week 5 or around then and being Cooper Kupp?
If he plays, yes, I feel confident. But is he ready to go in week 5? And you got to fear the recurrence of injury. If he's dealing with the nerve issue in his hamstring, and at what point does that become a problem for him once again? So it's not a bad idea if you got off to a good start and Cooper Kupp's on your team and you're trying to trade him for something. Like if your running back situation is a concern, like why not?
What are the odds that when Cooper Kupp comes back, he's the number 1 receiver in fantasy?
30%.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
Okay, what if he's a top 4 receiver?
50%,
35.
60,
35.
Oh, okay. All right, rank them rest of season. Puka Nacua, Amari Cooper, Brandon Ayuk.
Cooper, Ayuk, Nacua.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, you realize Cooper and Elijah Moore both have 25 targets. They have 50% of the targets for the Browns, but you wouldn't think that Elijah Moore has the same amount of targets as Amari Cooper. They both have a 25% target share and 25 targets. Cooper doing a lot more with them though. Okay, so I asked online for some buy lows and sell highs, and let's see what we got. I was going to bring up Josh Jacobs, but Heath already did that. Jahan Dotson. Sean says Jahan Dotson is a buy low. Agree or disagree?
One more week, you'll get him off the waiver wire. So don't give up much to get him.
I saw him dropped in 2 of my leagues this morning, and I am going to pick him up. But that's about all. Like whoever the worst player on my bench is that I can drop for him, that's about all I'm giving up for him right now. I'm really disgusted by the wide. I don't know how you have Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson, and you're targeting your tight ends as much as your wide receivers. But
all right, it doesn't sound like we really agree with that one. Marty says JSN is a buy low.
It's very similar to Jahan Dotson. Like you can't be giving up much in return for him. You can't be giving up much to get him. At this point, it's just he's been underwhelming, and it's understandable because the other 2 guys are healthy. It's going to probably take a situation like what's happening with Quentin Johnson for him to be relevant at this point.
I do think that it's not too early to see if you can buy low on a dynasty. There are some people that are more overreactive than others. So
yeah,
take a shot.
Some people might.
Yeah,
go ahead.
You should be actively trying to trade Tank Dell for JSN.
In a redraft league or a
dynasty?
Yeah, you wouldn't do that in a redraft league right
No.
now. No. How about that? From Russ, buy low on Breece Hall.
Yeah. Again, don't give up much for it right now, but yeah.
All these relevant running backs we're talking about: Swift, Achane. I think I called him Achane earlier. Sorry, Mostert, Kyren, Zach Moss. Are you giving them up for Breece Hall?
Not straight up right now, but maybe it's part of a package.
Yeah, a couple of them. Like I'd give up Moss for Hall.
Straight up.
Yeah,
Because of the Taylor thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you trade for Breece Hall, you can't expect to just throw him in your lineup immediately.
No.
It's got to be a long-term play here.
And it's got to be a situation where you're 3-0 or 2-1.
All right, this last one here is really interesting from Texas Bruin 67. Buy low on Joe Burrow. And I just think Tennessee, Arizona, Seattle in his next 3 games. It just makes this even more, not to use the word again, but interesting. Right? I mean, the matchups are great.
See, I was thinking the same thing you said about Breece Hall applies to Joe Burrow. The bye's week 7. Then you're at San Francisco. But like, I think he's maybe good in the second half of the season. I don't. How is he going to be any closer to 100% on a short week this week?
No, he threw 49 times though, so they're obviously willing to let him throw.
And there's so many busts in that secondary, like Higgins or Chase are one tackle, missed tackle away from some big games that's going to boost his numbers. Like I'd be buying low on Burrow.
Did you trust him right now to start him in this 3-week stretch?
Again, it depends on what else I have. So if I have Kirk Cousins, I'd be starting Cousins. If I have Jared Goff at home, Geno Smith this week, I'd start them. But you could probably turn Jordan Love into Joe Burrow right now. Joe Burrow manager would probably take that.
No, not me. But if the Joe Burrow manager's 0-3 or 1-2, then it certainly changes things. Okay, and let's do sell highs. I mentioned Justin Herbert earlier. We didn't kind of poo-poo that. Don't necessarily sell high on Justin Herbert. Marty says sell high on Brandon Ayuk.
I think this is the not week to be selling high on somebody coming off an injury. Like,
right.
If someone's buying him based on his week 1 and his preseason hype and all those things, sure. But you're probably not getting max value for it right now.
I do think this is a tough week for Ayuk because that Gannon defense is generally pretty zone heavy, and against zones, both Debo and Kittle have seen more targets and been better on a per route basis than Ayuk. But I agree. Like, it depends. Within the industry, there are certainly guys who think, forget about the injury, Ayuk's a top 20 wide receiver rest of the season.
Right.
And I'd be selling in those situations, but I don't think that's the reality on the ground in most places.
I think he could be a top 20 wide receiver. I don't think he could be a top 12 wide receiver. But what do you think?
I think you have to dislike Debo or give up on Kittle if that's the case, because as good as and great as Brock Purdy's been on a per pass basis, he's still throwing for 220 yards a game. And there's a lot of people that are going to have at least 30 or 40 of those yards.
It's also the thing with Ayuk is, Debo Samuel's got a rib injury. Who knows how serious it might be? If he misses this week's game,
right,
and Ayuk plays, guess who's probably going to go off? Zone, man, I don't care what defense. He's probably going to have a big game because that's just what the nature of this San Francisco offense has shown.
Yeah, I think for me, Heath, I'm more or less out on George Kittle. He's a tight end, and I'm not dropping him or anything like that. And I know he had a good game against a terrible defense without Brandon Ayuk, but I think there's a lot of evidence now that he's just going to have some boom weeks, but he's going to have a lot of really quiet weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe top 20 might be a little rich for Ayuk. I have to really think about it because wide receiver feels okay this year. Wide receiver feels
great.
Yeah, it does, right? I'm thinking of some of the guys that I was really high on, like Judy, which isn't great. I wasn't that high on DJ Moore. Hopkins, I was kind of high on. Christian Watson hasn't played. I was pretty high on him.
You got Watson injured, Kupp injured, Deontay Johnson injured.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that round 4 range, which was awful last year. Hasn't really been that great this year. But overall, I think wide receiver's been pretty good.
Especially with what Evans and Keenan Allen are doing.
Yeah. And you got Puka. So, are we selling high on Puka Nacua? What is Puka's value right now, do you think?
No idea.
I think you got a little bit of a sample size of what he's going to do without double-digit targets. And he got saved at the end with a 37-yard reception. So it could be a little ugly moving forward.
I would value him like a number 3 boom bust wide receiver. A good one, but I would be selling if I could get more than that.
Yeah.
What do they have next week?
Jay, I'll tell you in a second. But Jay says Nacua for Ayuk. Would you do that?
Yes.
I'd rather have Ayuk.
Yeah. Okay. And then last one, I don't know. We've spoken enough about Zach Moss I have some emails and some tweets that have some trade questions in them as well. So let's get to that. fantasyfootball@cbsi.com. That is the letter I. First email is from Steve from the land that provides 70 points and fantasy points aplenty. I have Tua and Anthony Richardson. Justin Fields was dropped. Should I keep Richardson or pick up Fields?
You're definitely keeping Tua. I would drop Richardson for Fields.
I would. I guess if Fields is being dropped, then maybe trading a quarterback's pretty difficult. I mean, I would at least explore what kind of starter can I get at running back or wide receiver for Tua. Can I get a top 5 running back or wide receiver for Tua and go through the year with Richardson and Fields? I'd be okay with that.
Okay, that is risky. Would you consider just adding Fields and having all 3 of them, at least temporarily?
The schedule is so beneficial for Fields coming up the next 3 games. I think he's going to play well. I don't want to give away something yet, but
Yeah.
You are putting that hot streak on the line. How about that?
Yeah, that's probably the smartest play if you can do it is carry all 3 quarterbacks for a week.
Jamie is playing with house money right now at start of the week. He's just absolutely
3-week sample size, buddy.
Okay. This one is from Suave Mave. I don't know. Would anyone drop Rashad White for Devon Achane?
If that's the worst player on your team, then yes.
Yeah, I guess you're telling me that you don't ever start Rashad White because he's your 5th man on your bench. Then I'd rather have Chan as the 5th man on my bench.
From Kyle, dear Mr. Pink, Mr. White, and Mr. Orange, half PPR. I gave McCaffrey and Zay Flowers for Tyreek Hill and DeAndre Swift.
McCaffrey.
I think it's a B+.
B-.
McCaffrey and Flowers for who and Swift?
Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
It's pretty close to a C.
C is good. C's average.
Yeah, I think it's a fair trade. If you have good running backs, it's fine.
From Nicholas, grade the trade in a 10-team PPR league. Yes, Dan, full point PPR. We already have some great emails ripping Dan coming in. I've already put it in the rundown for the mailbag show. It's really wonderful. Last week before the Akers news, I'm not going to go through all that because that was last week. This week, give Nakua, get Jonathan Taylor.
I like it.
All right. From Pistol P, I'm 1-2, 12-team half PPR league. Start 2 receivers. Give up Tyreek Hill and Chris Godwin. Get Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle. Yeah, you got to do that.
A-.
Yeah, A+.
A-, yeah. From Vincent, possible trade in a half PPR keeper league. You give up Rashawn Johnson and Tajay Spears, you get Jonathan Taylor. But Rashawn Johnson and Tajay Spears are both $1 players, and Jonathan Taylor is a $50 player. Grade the trade.
If you can win now, I don't care.
Yep.
Okay. Go for it, Vincent. It's an A if you can win now. Thank you all for watching and listening Fantasy Football today. We got starter sit for the AFC home games tomorrow morning, and we've got our live stream tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern for Heath and Jamie. And yes, Schaefer got it. It's Reservoir Dogs with Mr. Orange, Mr. Pink. Sorry. Forgot to say that. Good job. Schaefer's got a very good movie base. He's the anti-Dan. It's really good stuff. We're going to get him on the show more. Anyway, we'll talk to you tomorrow on Fantasy Football Today.